I'm Charles Epting from HR Harmer in New York City,
And I'm Michael Cortese of Noble Spirit in Pittsfield, New Hampshire.
and this is Conversations with Philatelists.
So, Charles, our guest today, I think you know him better than I do.
For once, I actually carried my own weight around here, and I got today's guest. I tracked this one down, so I'm proving my worth. But no, Wayne Youngblood is someone who's been a good friend basically since I started going to shows. He was someone who was very supportive and just very friendly early on. He's a very approachable guy.
Yeah,
Um, And Wayne is someone who I love seeing at shows. Whenever I see he's going to have a booth or, be there in any capacity, I always get excited because Wayne's just a really great guy. He's a very eclectic collector. I'm sure he'll talk about that, but everything he collects is interesting. He doesn't have to explain why this is
yeah.
cool. He tells you what it is, and you're just like, wow, I never even thought about that aspect of the hobby before. So Wayne is a great guy. I haven't seen him in months. Obviously, I haven't seen anybody in months. But Wayne's one of the ones I miss. Luckily, he and I email or see each other on Facebook. So
hmm
I kind of feel like I've been in touch with him. But it'll be nice to see him and talk to him on here.
Yeah, I'd only met him a couple times. He works kind of closely with Alex, too, in the YPLF, at least for the author track. I remember the first time I met him was in 2013 at the Milwaukee show when he sat down with a bunch of the youth there and gave a almost presentation on what it's like to be an author in the philatelic
He's
world.
very supportive. He's almost like a stamp professor. He teaches at
Yes.
summer seminar. He gives lectures at stamp shows. He's really again professorial. I think is a good word.
hmm
So giving with his knowledge.
Yes.
He just wants to teach. He wants to impart his knowledge on others, which
hmm
I just have the utmost respect for.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a
So
great guy all around. Most like all the people we interview.
that's true. Yeah, we're not picking the bad ones.
Yeah.
But no, let's get him on here. Let's
Yeah.
get Wayne in
All
and
right.
let's see what he has to say. See
Yeah.
how he's doing.
Let's bring him in.
Hello.
Hi.
Wayne, how's it going?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Thanks for
Yeah.
joining us.
Well,
Yeah.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me. Are you guys can hear me okay?
We
Yes.
can hear you
Absolutely.
perfect. And
Wonderful.
I'm liking the beard.
Yeah, thank you. This is my COVID hair and beard.
I gave up on mine a couple of months ago. You lasted a lot longer than I did with the beard.
Yeah, I'm at the point now where I'm actually having to groom it and use beard oil and stuff now.
Yeah.
But it's by far the fullest beard I've ever had.
Yeah. I saw you on one of the first stamp chats. It was a lot smaller.
Right, right,
Yeah.
That's a good segue, Michael. You did one of the APS stamp chats,
right.
One of the first
You-
ones.
one of the first ones, and you also were one of the summer seminar uh, lecturers, were you not?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've been keeping very busy in times of COVID. You seem to have had no trouble finding ways to teach and educate and promote the hobby. Even though we're all I haven't seen you since I don't even know when the last time I saw you was, but you've had no trouble staying active.
Oh, well, absolutely not. I mean, all other issues aside, my publishing schedule has remained consistent throughout everything because I work out of the home anyway. So that has kept me more than busy. Added to that, of course, is everybody else has all the time in the world right now. So I get lots of emails and phone calls and such. So, yeah, no, I stay more than busy.
When you talk about your publishing schedule, you're up to 5 publications. Is
Right.
that correct?
Well, kind of 5.5 ish, and headed towards a little bit more. But yeah, I currently edit. Of course, Topical Time. I've edited that for more than 10 years at this point. And then in addition to that, there's the American Stamp Collector and Dealer, the Collectors Club Philatelist for New York, the Confederate Philatelist for the CSA, and Duck Tracks for the Duck Stamp people. Did I miss anything? And then I'm actually breaking our eldest son into the philatelic publishing field too. He is now doing all the graphics work for the German postal specialist, and will be taking over at the beginning of the year the Pennsylvania philatelist. I'll do the editing, he'll do the graphic design, and I'm going to slowly turn some of the other publications, the design and graphic stuff over to him.
That's fantastic. How old is he?
He is 38.
Wow. And does he collect himself as well?
He's actually beginning, despite himself, he's actually beginning to get interested. Of course, one of the things, we have 3 sons, and one of the things is, as they were growing up, is I never really wanted to push my hobby too hard on them. I wanted them to be able to find the interest if that's something that they thought they'd like to do or not. Because I've seen so many times, parents who really push their kids into collecting, and the kids, as soon as they can, run away from it screaming. And so I always wanted it to be, certainly I would love to have had all of them collect, and they all did at various times. They certainly all did their stamp collecting merit badge and scouts and such. But he's the one who actually showed the most interest, and every time we send him something, of course, I put on as many interesting stamps as possible and things that reflect his interests. And he's actually beginning to collect. Whether he'll become hardcore or not is another question, but we'll see. But he does have an interest.
How did you yourself get started on collecting? So you grew up in New Mexico, and there must not have been, it's not like being in a major city where there's shows. What was it like for you early on collecting?
Well, my introduction to collecting actually came from my dad. He was more of a numismatist than he wasn't interested in stamps at all, actually. But I wanted to collect coins too, and as a little kid, of course, I didn't really have access to money or coins to speak of. So, and it was always, secondary. I mean, he had his interests, and there's no way I could compete with that. So at some point, he thought I might be interested in the stamps, and at the time he worked at the Los Alamos laboratory, and so he started bringing home pieces of packages and the mail that came in to the lab, and so I immediately started developing an interest in worldwide stamps. The other story I like to tell, and of course, Charles, I've got the exhibit and I've studied the secret drop boxes of Los Alamos for many, many years. And of course, those covers are incredibly rare. I like to say that I don't like to say, but I admit frequently that I probably had a hand in making them rare, because at the time when I was a little kid and I was asking Dad to ask his coworkers to bring stamps and mail home, he was bringing me covers, and I was tearing all the stamps off and soaking them off. And of course, a lot of the people that he worked with had been there during the war, so I'm sure I destroyed a number of drop box covers that I would love to have now. But at the time, my interest kind of exploded, and of course, it never, as you can tell, never went away. But I wasn't a member of a stamp club, and I didn't have a mentor or anything. So my initial means of removing stamps from paper was to just peel them right off. And then at some point I read something that damages stamps. So I thought, well, steam them over the tea kettle. So I scalded my fingers many times trying to steam stamps off before suddenly realized, give them a bath, throw them in the water for a little bit. And so then that actually became, sorting and soaking became my primary activity for a number of years. I frequently bought multiple pounds worth of on-paper mixtures, and one of those went south very badly. At a point I bought, it was like 20 pounds of Great Britain mixture, and I thought, I could be efficient. I'll just throw, about half of that in the bathtub all at one time. And, 4 days later, as it was turning into a goopy mass of pulp, I was still trying to peel stamps out of it. And I realized that didn't work so well either. So there are a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of stamps were destroyed before I actually became a member of a stamp club. And of course, once I did as a teenager, then that helped a lot. And I received some appropriate guidance, shall we say.
So when you talk about Oh, Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, what was your first area of expertise? You're so, you so know so much. You've written so many articles, books. What
Well,
was the first thing that kind of said, I'm going to look at this in depth?
probably probably fancy Kansas. I mean, that's something that caught my imagination very early on, and before I could even afford anything that resembled a real fancy cancels, I was cutting them out of auction catalogs and such, and keeping track of them. And so that was certainly that would be one of my earliest interests. Um, once I ended up at Lynn's as a staff writer, which was very early on in my career. At that point, I had three small children and a very low-paying job, so I couldn't really afford to buy stamps either. So my attention turned to something that has kind of stayed with me, and that was collecting what I called then collecting on a shoestring. And so that was a way of finding my ways to keep my collecting activities alive and vibrant, even when I couldn't buy stamps and covers. And so that became my primary approach and one of my primary columns for a number of years, and indeed I think has affected virtually every aspect of my writing, my teaching, my outreach with people is trying to keep things fun and affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And you often turn up very weird, oddball things that are not necessarily big ticket items. They're things you maybe uncover in a dollar box or something. But you're as good as anyone in this hobby at telling the stories behind these items. Again, whether it's a very expensive item or a cheap item, you really know how to make this stuff exciting and engrossing, I feel. What is there anything you're looking for, or is it just something you've never seen before? You've seen probably most everything in your time in the hobby. So you go to a stamp show, you look through a dollar box. What is it that catches your eye? What are your sensors looking out for?
It comes down to, dealers used to always ask me, well, what are you looking for? What do you collect? And my standard reply to that has simply become whatever I can get a good story from. So, if I sit down to a dollar box, or I sit down to a junk bin, or I buy a large lot at auction, the first thing I'm going through is, have I seen this before? And I'm just looking for something that's unusual. I just turned up something the other day. It was a lot of stuff I bought out of an obscure little auction in Denmark. And as it turns out, it's a pretty cool piece. It's it was on the first commercial flight across the Pacific on the Philippine Clipper, and it has the letter inside still from the publisher of the Nashville Banner, I guess that's what it was. And it turns out he was very well known. He's writing about his experience on the plane, and it's just a really cool piece. I that's one of the big things I always tell people is always look inside the cover too. There's frequently something really good there.
What has your experience been like with virtual summer seminar? I don't know. I assume you've been following virtual stamp show this week when we're currently talking. What has your take been on the way people have adapted to Zoom, social media, you name it, during COVID? Because again, you're a staple of the stamp. You're a very familiar face to a lot of people. What's your opinion on the last 6 months?
Yeah, and how, as a teacher of the virtual summer seminar, how different was it? Was it easier or harder? Or?
Well, that's a very complex question. First, I'll get to Charles first. And yeah. I think collectors have adapted, I think, amazingly to this, what is now an online world for most of us. And I'll backtrack. Back even as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, and I would do, or even when I was editor and publisher of Stamp Collector, a little further back, there were as many as 25 to 35% of collectors who were still not online in any significant way. And obviously that has changed, but in the last 6 months, because of the pandemic, we can't go to shows, we can't go to stamp club meetings. You got to do something. So I've collectors have adapted amazingly. Those collectors, and several I know personally, who never had any intention of going online other than maybe a last-minute snipe bid on eBay or something, are now Zooming with the best of us. And it's been a wonderful thing to watch. The Collectors Club has become probably one of the greatest outreaches in the hobby at this point, because of allowing as many people to come in and register for the programs as possible at no charge. From an educational standpoint, it's been also good, and I think the APS. Well, I know the APS is going to turn online education into a permanent part of its outreach as well. As an instructor, for me personally, it's been a little bit more challenging because as an instructor and as a frequent public speaker for many years, I rely on an audience. I'm sitting here right now. I'm looking at you guys. I'm reading your faces and such. And when I've got a class full of people and I'm trying to teach whatever it is I'm teaching, whether it's paper manufacturing or printing or whatever aspect that I'm teaching, I'm looking for the puzzled looks. I'm looking for someone who may have a question who's not forthright about raising their hand right away. And at least with the platform that we use for summer seminar, I have no visual cues. And so, it was a more formal type of lecture. I'm used to fitting what they say 75 pounds into a 10-pound bag. I've got way more than I can possibly teach in the allotted time. And I utilize students' questions and what they want to know to really help shape what I'm teaching. And so in a forum where I don't have the visual cues, it's a little bit more difficult. We'd stop and we'd take questions here and there. And I think it still worked out very well, but it's a different medium for that. Mm-hmm.
So do you see this as a viable solution going forward, even when the summer seminar opens up for in class sessions, having it online as well? I imagine it would still somewhat be easier because you'd be able to read off the people who are at least in the classroom.
I do, and the platform, excuse me, the platform that APS uses may change to some extent at some point. But when, for example, one of the classes that I had this year, I had 50 students in it, mm-hmm. and so there was no way that we could get the visuals on those. I don't think that the electronic or the online version will ever completely replace the in-person, as long as the in-person is still a possibility.
Right.
Because there's so much else that happens there on a social level as well as a philatelic and a learning level. But it's very clear that the APS showed that it's a very, very viable and I think an important aspect. And I think it's opened a whole new channel for them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back to something you mentioned briefly at the beginning, because I think, at least to me, it's fascinating, and I'm sure people listening as well. You mentioned these post office boxes in New Mexico.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit what that's all about? I think that's one of the best philatelic stories. Somebody who maybe doesn't collect stamps or doesn't know stamps, I think this is one of the avenues we can use to get them in the hobby, because this is a story that anyone with any appreciation of history can perk up to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When a lot of people don't know too much about the Manhattan Project, but of course it was in Hanford, Washington. There's an office in Washington, D.C., several different places, but the primary office was in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And this was Project Y. And in early 1943, they took over the Los Alamos Boys School, which was a couple of little buildings on the top of a mesa. And suddenly, within a few months, built this city, top secret city that eventually housed, more than 3,500 people before the end of the war. And it's not a secret that could be kept now. But here you are, you're on a mountaintop. They didn't have blackout procedures or anything. So, at night time, all the people in the valley and the places below could see the lights and wondered what was going on. But the aspect that obviously interested me the most was the mail, and everything had to go through the first drop box that was created was P.O. Box 1663, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so anyone who who came to Los Alamos had to come through P.O. Box 1663. If you were born during the war, you were born in P.O. Box 1663. If you got married, you were married in P.O. Box 1663. Montgomery Wards and other catalog producers and such got tired of sending hundreds of catalogs to this one post office box, which they thought, what are these people doing? But everything, it's the first and only time in United States history where civilian mail was censored without permission of the civilians, and unmarked as well. So everything coming in, if I was stationed up in Los Alamos and everything came in to me at Box 1663, that was all censored and marked just as any other World War II mail would be. But if you were my nephew and you were living in New Rochelle and I mailed you a letter, first of all, you didn't know where I was. You knew I was in New Mexico somewhere because of the P.O. box in Santa Fe. But you didn't know where I was, what I was doing. I couldn't tell you anything, and all my mail would be censored, but it wouldn't be marked. So when you would get a letter from me, you wouldn't have any idea that I'm on a top secret project. If I said anything that wasn't quite proper, they'd send it back to me and rewrite the letter. They wouldn't censor it or mark it in any way. It would be sent back to me to rewrite. And so there was that's one of the reasons why particularly a lot of the outgoing mail has never been identified as coming from the drop boxes, because it's not censored. It's not marked in any way that would allow you to know otherwise.
Huh. That's crazy.
It's amazing. And so much of it was destroyed, not just by me, but by other people as well. People who left, a lot of the scientists, to back up a little bit, virtually everybody who was assigned to Los Alamos was told to destroy all their personal paperwork, whether it's laboratory materials, correspondence, anything like this, because of national security issues. And so a lot of the people, when they left the hill as it was called, destroyed a lot of this. There were a few collectors up there, so there are 3 or 4 names that show up regularly within the correspondence that is known.
So you've written how many books? 10 books?
10 books altogether. Only 3 of them are philatelic.
Okay.
I was in a bookstore not long ago, and your name popped up. You can talk a little bit about what else you've written, because it's fascinating that you've got a double life, masquerading as a non-philatelist.
Right. So I started working with a publishing company. This is, I don't know, it's probably 2006 or so. I started working with a publishing company in Great Britain and writing different types of books. I've written books on Mark Twain. I've written several books on Matthew Brady, the Civil War photographer, on Edward S. Curtis, the Southwest photographer of Indians and such, and on down the line. And these are more coffee table books. There's certainly plenty of text in there, but they're very, very image rich. And the fun part of the process on those was that I had complete license to be able to go out and research whatever images I wanted to include. I had full freedom of publishing what I wanted to. So when I did a book on the Cherokee tribe, for example, I went out to Cherokee, North Carolina, went to the reservation, dug through their archives and their photo archives and such, and was able to, I think, create much more interesting books. So that's the type of publishing I've done. And again, I periodically, I don't know whenever they reprint them. Some of them are still in print, and I see different editions of them. They certainly don't let me know because they're done on contract, but I run into them periodically.
So are you working on anything now since the pandemic started, now that you're spending more time at home? Are you researching a new topic or
Well, I've got a number of different book ideas, but again, the time isn't there for me to work on them right now. So I have things I work on multiple things simultaneously. Even with articles, I'm working on articles that I probably won't publish for another year and a half or two yet, because I'm still gathering material or gathering background material for them. What happens is, let's say I buy a large collection somewhere and I start going through it. As I break it down, the materials that I don't sell or resubmit to auction or whatever goes into my different collections. And a lot of times these are held in Hollinger boxes or file folders or whatever until they reach what I call critical mass. And once that Hollinger box explodes, then it's time to write about it or to exhibit it or whatever.
It's a fantastic process. Just when whatever starts overflowing is what you're doing next.
Yeah, and it's funny because sometimes things will come to me within a short period of time. I may, or I become obsessed with it enough, I actively start searching for a number of different items to complete whatever it is I'm writing about. And other times, maybe 10 years in between adding items to it. And then there's still one of my favorite collections, and I'm always actively adding to it, and I actually will come up with an exhibit at some point on this, and I call it my philatelical chamber of horrors. And this is based on one of the very earliest stamp dealers who, anytime somebody brought a forgery into him, he just pinned it up to the wall immediately. So, but for me, so many collectors, myself included, have inadvertently destroyed materials through poor stewardship, or sometimes they'll destroy actually a good philatelic item trying to turn it into something better. And so I collect all this stuff, and I periodically write a column about it. But all these horrors that people have collected, this includes I've got a nice $1 mint transmiss that had curled up over the years, and somebody tried to uncurl without doing it properly, and it's in 3 pieces. Things never hinged though. It's or I've got a beautiful 4-margin number 2 that's only missing a quarter of the upper left corner. So things like this. So I want to make an exhibit that will truly terrify people at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
hopefully teach them in the process what not to do.
Well, exactly. And some of the other items that are in this include things like, are you familiar with the control perfins on some of the early private perf stamps? Well, of course, a lot of those, and particularly on some of the higher, 4 cent and things like this, are pretty scarce items with the control perfin. The catalog's $1,200 or whatever. But someone who isn't aware of that sees it as just a Shermack private perf, which is normally worth less than a standard imperfort. So they'll cut the private perfs off, and the only way that you know that it was a Shermack is because it's got the control perfin, which would have made it a much more valuable item, except, somebody cut the private perfs off. And so there's a lot of things like that people have ruined trying to be greedy.
You have not necessarily, and this is not something I told you we were going to talk about, but it just came to mind because it makes me laugh. You have not necessarily ruined stamps, but you have enhanced and modified stamps at various times. Is that correct? You seem to have a lot of fun with the hobby. There's a lot of people who take it seriously, and that's great. There's a lot of people who treat it, very studiously. But you like to make people laugh as well, it seems. You've posted some very amusing concoctions on Facebook where you have fused and made sort of a chimera multiple stamps to great comedic effect.
Exactly. And as a matter of fact, I even have a one frame exhibit that I'll have to trot it out again one of these days. But back in the days before Photoshop, and there was a day before then, I did all these old school, and they're true Frankenstamps. And so what it is, of course, the most famous of these, and this is what inspired me to begin with, is Pat Hearst used to claim credit for it, but I don't know who did it for the first time, but you're familiar with the three Peseta nude maha
Goya's, yep,
exactly. Well, it's the same, the same size and same color basically as a 3-cent Mother's Day stamp showing Whistler's mother, from the 1930s. And so by very carefully trimming out the nude figure and reposing her on the 3-cent stamp to cover up the rocking chair old lady, that there's a very, very hilarious version of that. And so with that, I started trying to come up with things that were equally as funny, equally as creative by cutting vignettes out of one stamp and sticking it onto another and doing it as seamlessly as possible so that you can't really see where the cuts are made, so a lot of X-Acto blades and a lot of, I used to do this when I had long telephone calls and I had my hands free. And so then I started working into the postal history aspect of that. So this would also involve, some forged postmarks and some things like this. And to the point where I actually created a storyline for all this. And that's where those are coming from. And so I periodically post some of those images as you've seen. But to me, but to get back to it, the hobby has to be fun. If you're not enjoying the hobby, then you should find something else to do. We're in this, even those of us who are professional in hobby, if we're not enjoying what we're doing, we might as well be doing something else. So enjoyment has always been the primary goal for me.
Well, it's good to see somebody doing something positive with the kind of makeshift two stamps into one. The ones that I've seen are people trying to fool other collectors by cutting out the center of a Jenny and putting it in there, or the Pan Americans, making them inverted, and they're quite convincing to the untrained eye. But
you're the best intentioned forger out
there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then it's funny, Beck, I don't know if you ever knew Roger and Bonnie Riga of Riga Stamps. They ran a business for many years, and their primary focus were things like revenues and Cinderellas and things like this. And early on, they kind of fell in love with what I was doing. And so, again, this is at a time when I really didn't have funds to invest in the hobby to speak of. But what they would do is they actually had a ready market for my creations, and obviously not to defraud anybody. It was for the novelty of it. But they would put in orders with me, so I would have to make so many of this creation, and then they'd trade out stock for me. So I was able to get stamps by cutting up others.
That's pretty funny.
Other than New Mexico, you always surprise me whenever I see you at a show. I think you had French bicycle revenue stamps fairly recently.
Right.
It's always something. What are the other interests that you keep coming back to? What are the ones that are not passing fads that maybe you've built an exhibit, or again, maybe it's just the box full of stuff? But what are the ones that have stuck with you the longest?
Well, I have multiple collections of things that I really do enjoy, whether I exhibit them or not. Certainly, modern postal history and unusual uses have always been forefront. I love auxiliary markings, anything that has slowed or delayed the mail. The stranger the cause, the better. Whether it's postal carrier couldn't complete his rounds because of the vicious dog, or the quarantine for all plants in Hawaii, or all these different things, the crash covers, all this kind of stuff. So I love anything like that. Certainly, fancy cancels continues to be something that I enjoy, including modern fancy cancels. A lot of people don't really realize that a lot of the pictorial machine cancels of the 60s through 90s in particular, when those are struck really nicely on a stamp, they're tomorrow's fancy cancels and premium items. So I love doing those as well. I love first day covers that actually have traveled through the mail, and bear evidence of that. That's how they started out before we had grace periods and plastic envelopes that protect them and such. And so I love anything like that. Anything that's been damaged in the mail, and again, all the weird stuff, but.
Yeah, and so you're not just, you are interested in stamps as works of art and as, little bits of our history, but the postal operations also interest you as well. The actual getting from point A to point B. I think a lot of people just stick the stamp in their album and that's that. It's got a picture of a boat or an airplane on it. But for you, it's as much about the transport of the mail as it is about the stamp itself.
It's the whole bundle. EFOs, errors, freaks, and oddities, plate varieties, all that kind of stuff. So everything from the planning of the stamp on through till the item has been delivered. But yeah, the transmission of the mail is it's a lot of times people try to compare stamps and coins, and coins are quite static by comparison to me, because you've got graded coins. You can have your 1871 Indian head penny, and graded however level you want to get it to for uncirculated. But once you have with the stamps, you have the whole world of the printing, the designing, the processing, and then once you add the mail processing to it too, you've just opened up in the entire universe to it's an endless possibilities. And mail processing is fascinating. And we often think that a lot of the research for early mail processing has been done, but there's new discoveries constantly being made, and of course with the rapid advance of technology in the last 20 years and the internet and so many things becoming available, we're finding resources that we've never had access to, even newspaper accounts of things, and so there's a whole world of additional research that can be done.
So speaking on the advancement of technology, you've been on the APS board of directors for quite some time now, right?
Well, it's been quite a while since I've been off, but I was on APS board of directors for a decade. Yeah.
And what years were those? From when?
That was from roughly 1998 to 2008 or so.
Oh, okay.
I've been off quite a while. But.
Okay. Were there any changes in those? So that was kind of as technology was just taking off. Did you see any changes in the direction the APS was taking during those years to how to promote the hobby? And now that you're off the board, are you seeing it change as well? They must be focusing. This seems like a kind of a loaded question.
Well, not loaded so much as complex.
Yeah.
It's, of course, much of the time that I was on the APS board, our primary mission was dealing with the match factory, moving out of the old headquarters and into the match factory, and making sure that we were going to have the financial future for the APS to actually turn that into a revenue source. So that was one of the biggest functions. But along with that, our first efforts at the website were there too, and we had a lot of misstarts. But yeah, all that was, and we were concerned about outreach. One of the other big things that has never really come to fruition at the time. But we were moving into the match factory. We were expanding our capabilities as an organization. We were actually looking for outreach, and so Bob Lamb was still executive director at this point, and he and I had a number of conversations, and we're actively beginning to reach out towards other collectibles. Of course, the first one that came to mind was deltiologists. We thought that perhaps by forming, by having the APS as a strong central administrative arm, that we could actually work with other collectibles and take over the functions for them to help them thrive. So we thought that we could use, for example, if we would take over administration of postcard collecting, of baseball card collecting, things like this, that really had no, there's virtually no other than coins, there's virtually no other collectible hobby that has the infrastructure that we do.
Right.
And so we really did feel that we could reach out to other collectibles, help them thrive, and help us as well. And that's something I'd still like to see APS do at some point. But
diversify the not the customer base, but the membership base.
Diversify the membership base, and also take on functions for other organizations and help. There's still so much disorganization and so much fraud in a number of different collectible areas, and I really did feel that we could help others out a lot with that. And of course, we have our own outreach that we need to worry about within our own hobby, and that's been, as technology has exploded, I still hear people complaining about how stamp collecting is a dying hobby, and you guys both know this. It's that nothing could be further from the from the truth at this point. We have tens of thousands of people who are actively buying and selling on eBay and Hipstamp and all these other places, none of whom belong to any organization, none of whom subscribe to any publication, but they're spending a lot of time and a lot of money on their hobby. And reaching these people, and more specifically keeping them from making some of the same mistakes I made as a beginning collector with no network, is a huge mission for us to deal with at this point. And I still don't know how to crack that nut. I mean, I think a lot of us are trying different ways of doing that, but I don't know how many collectors I have contact with through sales on eBay who not only have no affiliation with any organized part of the hobby, nor do they have any interest in it.
Right.
But they love their stamps.
Right. They're operating as an island and trying to find out what they want, how they could benefit from being part of an organization.
Exactly. And convincing them that there is indeed a benefit to that is a real challenge.
Right.
Do you mentioned earlier that you don't think that the virtual summer seminar is a permanent solution by any means. We always need that physical component with shows, with exhibiting, with a seminar like that. Do you think that one of the ways to reach these people, these islands, as Michael mentioned, is to, I guess sort of segueing this question, will the virtual component that we've all grown to either love or tolerate over the last couple of months have a lasting impact in the hobby? Do you think this is one way we can maybe reach out to those people? Do you think that there will always be remnants of our COVID lockdown life moving forward?
With no question, absolutely. And maybe I miscommunicated before, but while I don't see that the online aspect of the summer seminar will replace the other, I see it as an adjunct, a permanent adjunct, and certainly a highly desirable one. The biggest challenge I still see with that, I mean, and certainly we're not, I would hope that we don't lose everything that we've gained in the last few months in terms, in some ways we've become a far more social at a distance, a hobby than we've been in many, many years. So I certainly hope we don't lose any of that. But I still see a challenge in reaching those who aren't already inclined. We get the odd person coming in, like with the summer seminar online this week. Some of the registrants coming in are new. I think they've signed up another couple of dozen new members just during the last couple of days. So we are getting some people in, but I think a lot of those people were already involved in some organized aspect of the hobby beforehand. And so reaching out and getting to these other people who are very, very active, very, very devoted to their stamps is still a challenge, even with the online aspect. Although I think we have a better chance at doing it successfully post-COVID than we ever have before.
Yeah.
If there is a post-COVID.
Yeah, I don't know how many of our... I wouldn't imagine a lot of our customers on eBay are APS members. The ones that are usually put their APS number in messages when they send us messages, but almost uniformly all APS members put their number at the bottom. But we get maybe 5 of those a week out of the hundreds and hundreds of messages we receive a week. So, hey, how do we as a stamp dealer reach out to those people and say, hey, you'll benefit from being APS members?
Mm-hmm, exactly. And APS used to provide us with post-paid reply cards that we could include as stuffers with our stuff
Right.
that we send out. And I've been an eBay dealer for over 20 years at this point, and I have included thousands of those in there, and I have recruited half a dozen new members over all that time, all those cards mailed. I mean, they're people just, until you show them a reason or until they stumble in and, hey, this is pretty cool, they just don't see it.
Yeah, they almost have to come to the conclusion themselves. You can't tell them what to do. It seems like they just fight it.
Where we have had some success with outreach is letting them know about shows in their area.
Yes.
And so we get that, but right now, not shows so much. We just have completed the first show, or at least large show, since the pandemic hit with the St. Louis Stamp Expo. And again, they did a fantastic job. Now, the biggest mistake they made is they didn't let anybody know about it. Their publicity was non-existent until just before the show. But the measures they took to try to keep collectors and dealers safe is a perfect blueprint and roadmap for anyone who's contemplating doing a show anytime in the near future. Going forward, people really do need to study how St. Louis did this. Mm-hmm. And even still, personally, I'm still uncomfortable with going to a show,
but as more and more of them happen with this St. Louis model, and everything turns out all right and positive, people will become more comfortable.
Well, exactly, exactly, and there's a lot of pent up demand for shows.
Yeah, Alex said that all around the dealers and everybody he spoke to at the show were positive about the outcome. I think he said 20 out of the 21 dealers that were there already submitted their fees for the next show.
Right, and the 21st one didn't, only because he's retiring. So,
okay.
And simultaneously the same weekend there was also a show in Wichita, and I spoke with a small show, and I spoke with a couple of the dealers who did that show as well, and they had similar reports. There weren't very many people at the show, but those who came were ready to spend money and were thrilled to do so, and so they all had good shows. And again, as you mentioned, I think once that door begins to start opening a little bit again, and people become a bit more comfortable with going back to shows, I don't believe for a minute that we are losing the show aspect of our hobby. Several people have predicted that as a result of the downside of the pandemic. people love shows still, and those are going to continue. We may lose a couple of shows just because, but I don't for a minute believe we're going to lose shows in general. It's still too important. There's nothing like, as much as I love going on eBay or even going through dealers' websites and such, there's nothing like the serendipity of digging through a dealer's box at his table. It's just
yeah, it's a completely different experience.
Well, I just wanted to thank you again, Wayne, for joining us, especially on such short notice. We really appreciate having you here, and it's great to catch you again. I miss seeing you, miss sitting at your table and seeing what you've got, but it's fun to reconnect like this virtually.
Absolutely.
This has been great. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and
hopefully we'll see you in person before long.
Yeah,
hopefully so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Thanks a lot, Wayne.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
That was a lot of fun. I was really looking forward to catching up with Wayne, and I'm glad that we were able to connect with him.
Yeah, that was great.
And when you first pitched conversations with philatelists to me, I think it was fun when you talked about sort of getting beneath the facade of a lot of these people. And I love Wayne talking about the books he writes on, these great Western photographers, Civil War photographers, again, cutting up stamps to make little comedic vignettes.
Yeah.
I think that sort of depth, you go to a stamp show, you see Wayne with his table, with his stock, and he's got cool things to show you, but he's stamp dealer Wayne. And when we do something like this, it's fun to sort of see the three-dimensional.
Yeah. See the man behind the stamp.
Exactly. Behind the stamp of clown superimposed on it, which is one of my favorite works of art that he created. But no, it's fun to hear about his background. Again, growing up in New Mexico, not somewhere where there's necessarily a stamp store on every corner. No stamp exhibitions. Wayne, it sounds like, really had to figure it out on his own. And
right, and it's a great testament to how much he wanted to stick with the hobby. We spoke with Graham last week, and he talked about those people who want to get started in the hobby, but they don't know how to. And then Wayne just got started, and he stuck with it.
And I love he's the first to admit the mistakes that he made.
Right. And that's exactly why we need mentors for people early on as well. But and now Wayne's one of those mentors.
He's helping people avoid the pitfalls that he fell into very early on, and I think that's great that he's giving back so much.
But at the same time, recognizing that they're not be-all and end-all mistakes. They're not, it's not the end of philately if you accidentally tear a $1 Trans-Mississippi into 3 pieces. It's just...
No, you're right. Again, the fact that he's so approachable, so that's what, when I met him for the first time early on in my time with the hobby, he doesn't make you feel bad if you mess up, and I think that's fine. I think his philatelic horrors exhibit is it's very tongue in cheek. It's not tisk you ruined a stamp. It's hey, let's laugh at this together and learn from it at the same time.
It's a testament to the philatelists we once were.
That is very true, and maybe still are sometimes. No, this was a lot of fun. We are, for anyone listening, we're on YouTube.
Yep.
We're on Podbean. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
We now have a website, philatelypodcast.com.
Yes, and the email is equally as...
I was going to say, the email is equally as creative, philatelypodcast@gmail.com.
Right.
So if anyone wants to reach out, we love hearing from you. Actually, Wayne reached out to us.
Yeah.
And said how much he enjoyed the podcast, and I said, I've been wanting to have you on. Thank you for, lighting a fire under me.
It's a look behind the curtain there. It's how it happened.
Exactly. So reach out to us, please. We love hearing from you. Until next time, this has been a lot of fun, Michael, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see you next time, and good luck overseas.
Thank you. We'll I'll tell you all about the Serbian Postal Museum when I'm back.
Yeah, sounds great.
Fantastic.
Right.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.